big show on the Progressive Movement Unit. This is known as the Roots of Progressivism. So there are two ways to deal with problems. On the one hand is conservatism, and this is when you believe that the traditions and strategies of the past are the best way to deal with society's problems. Old ways are the better ways. The opposite of that is progressivism, where you believe that new ways and strategies are necessary to solve society's problems. We need something new. Now, this of course would be like a continuum, and you could be somewhere in between, but those are the two opposite sides. It's not about political parties. This is about conservatism. Do you believe that the old ways are better to solve problems, or do you believe in progressivism, new ways? Progressivism was a reform movement of the early 1900s concerned with curing problems of urbanization and industrialization. These ideas have been around for decades, dating back to the 1870s and through the Populist Party of the 1890s. So the Progressive Era fits between about 1900 and 1920, so we're between the Gilded Age that we've looked at under industrialization and the 1920s. During this era, we had very few rich people at the top of the pyramid of society, and we had most of the people living in very poor conditions and earning very little money. The Progressivism era came about when workers started to protest and demand basic rights, like an 8-hour workday, like no more child labor, better working conditions, better housing, higher pay, right to form unions. They also called for things like an income tax instead of a tariff. Remember, a tariff raises the price of goods for all people all of the time, and it really punishes poorer people more because a tax on something that a person would buy that has less money means more than if you're very rich, and more control over government officials. The problem during the Progressive Era was that the rich people at the top had all the power. Government officials could be bought off easily, a lot of corruption. And muckrakers came to the rescue. These were journalists who investigated and reported on all types of corruption. People like Jacob Riis and Ida Tarbell. McClure's magazine published lots of articles written by progressives, and Upton Sinclair, who wrote the book The Jungle, which we're actually going to read an excerpt from during this unit. The muckrakers captured the attention of the American people, and people started to care and demand change. So, what was progressivism? A collection of different ideas and activities as a response to problems in American society that had emerged from the growth of industry. Who were the progressives? They belonged to both political parties. Most were urban, educated, middle class. Leaders in the movement were journalists, social workers, educators, and politicians. What did the progressives believe? They believed that industrialization and urbanization had created many social problems. They had strong faith in science and technology, and the scientific principles could produce solutions to society's problems. And they believed that government had to be fixed before it could be used to fix other problems. A muckraker was a journalist who uncovers abuses and corruption in a society. There was a big push to make government more efficient, increase government efficiency by modeling after some business philosophy, and you'll read about Frederick Winslow Taylor and scientific management, who applied scientific principles to make business more efficient, and they wanted to apply those same ideas to government. They saw corruption and inefficiency in city government, especially city government. Progressives push for a direct primary, a vote held by all members of a political party to decide their candidate for public office, so people could have a choice on who was actually going to run. The initiative, which is the right of citizens to place a measure or issue before the voters or the legislature for approval. And to go along with this idea is the referendum, which allowed citizens to vote on proposed laws directly without going to the legislature. So people could actually have a lot more power. And finally, the recall, which enables voters to remove unsatisfactory elected officials from office. Progressives also pushed for women's suffrage, which was the effort to gain the right to vote for women. The National American Women's Suffrage Association, led by Carrie Chapman Catt, this organization helped get the 19th Amendment finally ratified, guaranteeing women the right to vote in 1920. So women have only legally had the right to vote nationwide for a relatively short period of time of our nation's history. They also want to reform society. Along with reforming the political system, progressives also focused on social problems such as crime and illiteracy, alcohol abuse, child labor, and the health and safety of Americans. Muckraker John Spargo's book, The Bitter Cry of Children, brought to attention much of the abuses of child labor, including 9-year-olds working in coal mines and children working 10-hour days for 60 cents per day. Many states passed laws establishing minimum age for work and compulsory education laws. These kind of things go together. So rather than allowing 12-year-olds to work, 12-year-olds had to be in school. They also passed health and safety codes. Laws were passed to protect workers, and progressives also favored zoning laws, dividing a city into zones for commercial and residential zones. This graphic is actually Urbandale's zoning laws, and saying what can be built in what parts of the city. Progressives also favored the prohibition movement. They blamed alcohol for many of society's problems. There was also an effort to curb the power of big business. Progressives believed that big corporations needed regulation, and in particular the railroad industry, and pictured as Jay Gould, if you'll remember from our industrialization unit, and some of the abuses from railroads at that time. And that's our big show on the roots of progressivism.